My father laughed when I walked into his board meeting. He told me to leave the real business to the adults and go back to my cute little job. He didn't know that while he was mocking me, I was managing a $600 million portfolio. He tried to kick me out, claiming I wouldn't understand complex finance. But he stopped laughing when the chairman revealed the truth. I hadn't just come to watch. I had secretly bought 55% of his failing company. I wasn't his daughter anymore. I was his new boss. My parents, Richard and Patricia Chin, had built Chin Technologies from a garage startup 25 years ago. They manufactured specialized circuit boards for aerospace applications, and for 2 decades, they dominated their niche. But the last 5 years had been brutal. Competition from overseas, a failure to innovate, and frankly, some catastrophically poor financial decisions had left them hemorrhaging money. I was their only child, Emma. According to them, I had majored in something useless: computational finance and applied mathematics at MIT. After graduation, I had taken a position at what Mum called my little job at a boutique investment firm in Boston. What they didn't know was that I wasn't just an analyst. I was a partner, and I had spent the last 3 years making extremely calculated investment decisions that had grown my personal portfolio from my signing bonus and early stock options into something substantial. Very substantial. The emergency board meeting had been called because Chin Technologies was circling the drain. They had burned through their credit lines, alienated 2 major clients with delayed deliveries, and were facing a potential bankruptcy filing within 60 days. The board had been meeting for 2 hours before I arrived. I deliberately came in late, slipping into a seat at the back of the room. Mum spotted me immediately. "Emma," she frowned. "What are you doing here?" "This is a board meeting. I was invited," I said quietly, keeping my voice level. Dad actually laughed. "Invited? Honey, this is serious business. We are discussing the future of the company." "I understand that," I said. "Do you?" Mom's tone was sharp. "Because we are talking about complex financial restructuring, debt-to-equity swaps, and convertible notes. This isn't something you can just Google." I opened my laptop, saying nothing. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Most of them knew why I was there. The chairman had insisted on my attendance, but my parents were clearly in the dark. Marcus Webb, their CFO, tried to redirect the conversation. "Richard, Patricia, perhaps we should continue with the agenda. We need to discuss the refinancing proposals." "In a minute," Dad said, still focused on me. "Emma, sweetheart, I appreciate that you are trying to be supportive, but this really isn't appropriate. These are confidential discussions about the company's financial situation." "I am aware of the financial situation," I replied calmly. "Revenue is down 42% over 3 years. Operating losses of $18 million last quarter alone. Your current burn rate gives you maybe 8 weeks of runway before you crash." The room went completely still. Mom's face flushed. "Where did you hear those numbers?" she demanded. "The preliminary financial reports," I said. "I reviewed them last week. Those reports are confidential." Dad snapped, slamming his hand on the table. "Who leaked them to you?" Thomas Harrison, the board chairman and one of the original angel investors, cleared his throat. "Richard. Patricia. I think we need to—" "No, this is completely inappropriate," Mom interrupted. "Emma, I don't know what you think you are doing, but you need to leave now." I didn't move. "I am a voting member of this board," I said clearly. "I have every right to be here." Dad actually laughed again. That same condescending sound I had heard my entire life whenever I tried to discuss business with them. "A voting member?" Dad scoffed. "Emma, you don't own any shares in Chin Technologies. You aren't on the board. I don't know who told you that you could just walk into a meeting and play pretend. She owns 47% of the company, Thomas said quietly. The words hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't quite detonated yet. Mom turned slowly to face Thomas. What did you just say? Emma owns 47% of Chin Technologies, Thomas repeated. She has been accumulating shares for the past 14 months. She is our largest single shareholder, and she has been for 6 months. I watched my father's face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and then anger. That's impossible, Dad sputtered. The shares are closely held. We would have to approve any transfer. The shares she purchased were from the employee stock option pool, and from 3 board members who sold their positions, Thomas explained. All legitimate, arm's-length transactions. All properly documented with the SEC. This is ridiculous, Mom said, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. Emma doesn't have that kind of money. Do you know what 47% of this company is worth? Based on your last valuation? Approximately $440 million, I said quietly. Though honestly, that valuation was generous. Based on current performance, I'd estimate the real value at closer to $320 million, which means I overpaid by about $120 million. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus, the CFO, was staring at his laptop screen, fingers flying over the keys. My God, she's right, Marcus whispered, looking up in shock. The filings are all here. How did I miss this? Because the purchases were made through 3 different LLCs. I explained calmly. All properly disclosed, but you would have to do some digging to connect them all to me. Dad stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is some kind of joke, Emma. What game are you playing? No game, Dad, I replied. I'm an investor. And frankly, I'm a concerned one. This company is in serious trouble. She can't even read a balance sheet. Dad shouted, turning to the board members as if appealing to them for sanity. His voice was rising now, losing its professional veneer. She is 28 years old. She works as some kind of junior analyst. She is a managing partner at Quantum Capital. Thomas interrupted, his voice cutting through Dad's rant. She has been running their tech portfolio for 2 years. Her fund returned 43% last year. Mom's face went pale. That's not possible. We would have known. You would have told us. Why? I asked simply. So, you could dismiss it like you've dismissed everything else I've ever done. So you could explain to me that my little job isn't real business. Don't take that tone with us, Mom snapped. But there was something desperate in her voice now. Then don't dismiss me in a board meeting, I replied, keeping my voice level. I am here as an investor. Actually, a majority investor. I paused to let that sink in. I closed a purchase agreement this morning for an additional 8% from Daniel Rothstein. I nodded at the board member who looked distinctly uncomfortable. That brings my stake to 55%. I am the majority shareholder. The room erupted. 3 board members started talking at once. Marcus was frantically typing. Mom and Dad just stared at me like I had grown a second head. Thomas banged his gavel. Order. Please, let's address this rationally. There is nothing rational about this, Dad said. His voice was quieter now, but harder. If this is true, then what? What exactly do you think you are going to do, Emma? Swoop in and save the company with your vast business experience. I am going to vote to approve the restructuring plan Thomas proposed, I said. The one you were about to reject. Mom turned to Thomas. What restructuring plan? Thomas slid a document across the table. Quantum Capital, through one of its funds, has offered a $200 million investment, Thomas explained. It would give Chin Technologies the capital to retool the manufacturing line, invest in R&D, and hire the senior management you desperately need. In exchange, they take a convertible note that would allow them to increase their equity position To 65%, if milestones aren't met. Absolutely not, Dad said immediately. We are not diluting ourselves into minority shareholders of our own company. You already are minority shareholders, I pointed out. I own 55% as of this morning. This is a corporate raid, Mum said, her voice shaking with fury. You are trying to steal the company we built. I am trying to save it, I corrected. If you file for bankruptcy, you lose everything. The company will be liquidated. The brand will be sold for parts. And your 240 employees will lose their jobs. This way, the company survives, grows, and everybody keeps their jobs. Under your control, Dad said bitterly. Under professional management, I said. I am voting to retain Thomas as chairman. I am voting to bring in Catherine Walsh from Innovate as CEO. And I am voting to create a new executive committee that will actually hold leadership accountable. And what about us? Mom asked quietly. I met her eyes. You will remain on the board. You will keep your salaries reduced to market rate. And you will have the satisfaction of watching the company you built continue to exist instead of being dismantled in bankruptcy court. This is insane, Dad said, pacing the room. You are 28. You expect us to believe you have $440 million to invest in a struggling manufacturing company. I had $620 million under management as of last quarter, I said calmly. Personally, that doesn't count the $4.2 billion in the funds I manage for Quantum. The Chin Technologies investment represents about 70% of my personal portfolio. It is a significant bet, yes, but I've run the models. With proper management, this company can be worth $2 billion in 5 years. Marcus was nodding slowly. The models are actually conservative. If we can lock down the SpaceX contract she is referring to in her analysis. What SpaceX contract? Mom interrupted. The one I've been negotiating for the last 4 months, I said. They need a specialized circuit board manufacturer for their next-generation Starlink satellites. Chin Technologies has the perfect capabilities, but you didn't have the capital to handle the volume. With Quantum's investment, you can expand production. It's a $340 million contract over 3 years. The room had gone completely silent again. Dad stopped pacing. Mom gripped the edge of the table. Why? Mom finally asked. If you have all this money, all this success, why invest in us? You could have let us fail. You could have bought the assets in bankruptcy for pennies on the dollar. Because despite everything, it is still the company you built, I said quietly. Because 240 people depend on these jobs. Because the technology is actually good. I paused, looking from my mother to my father. And because I wanted to prove that I could do it, I said. That I understand business. The words hung in the air. I watched my father's face flush. I watched my mother look away. Thomas cleared his throat. I think we should take a 15-minute recess. Let everybody process this information. Then we can reconvene and vote. The board members filed out, avoiding eye contact with my parents. Thomas paused at the door. Emma, can I speak with you outside? I followed him into the hallway, leaving my parents alone in the boardroom. That was brutal, Thomas said quietly once we were out of earshot. It was necessary, I replied. You could have told them privately before the meeting. I tried, I said, shaking my head. 3 months ago, I called Dad to discuss the financials. He told me to focus on my career and let him worry about the business. They weren't going to listen unless they had no choice. Thomas nodded slowly. The restructuring plan is solid. But you know this is going to destroy your relationship with your parents. What relationship? I asked. The one where they dismiss everything I say. Where every achievement is diminished because it doesn't match their definition of success. Where I am still treated like a child. We stood in silence, watching through the glass window as my parents sat at opposite ends of the long table, not speaking to each other. They are going to fight this, Thomas warned. They will look for any legal angle. I know, I said. That's why I made sure every filing was perfect. Every transaction was arm's length. They can hire the best lawyers in New York and they won't find anything improper. Thomas sighed. They are brilliant engineers, Emma, but they are terrible managers. And they are even worse at admitting when they need help. That's why the plan puts real operators in charge, I said. They don't have a choice. I control 55% of the shares. The 15 minutes stretched to 25. Finally, we reconvened. My parents were the last to enter. They sat together, presenting a united front. We have a proposal on the table, Thomas announced. A $200 million investment from Quantum Capital. I'd like to open the floor for discussion before we vote. I have something to say, Dad announced, standing up. He had regained some composure. What Emma has done here today is legal, perhaps. But it is not ethical. She has used her insider knowledge to orchestrate a hostile takeover. She sat at our table and said nothing while secretly buying our company. Dad, I started. I am not finished, he interrupted. You want us to simply accept that we are minority shareholders in our own company? That we should step aside for some outsider? Catherine Walsh isn't an outsider, I said. She took Innovate from $50 million to $800 million. She isn't us, Mom argued. She doesn't understand our culture. With respect, Marcus interjected quietly, our culture won't matter if the company goes bankrupt in 2 months. Mom turned on him. Whose side are you on, Marcus? I am on the side of the 240 employees, Marcus said steadily. And Emma's plan is the only viable option. That's not true, Dad argued. We have other offers. You have one offer from Davidson Industrial, Thomas corrected. They want to buy the assets for $120 million and shut down the facility. Everyone loses their jobs. There have to be other options, Mom insisted. There aren't, I said. I spent 4 months looking. The only reason Quantum is investing is because I am willing to bet my personal capital on the turnaround. You should have come to us, Dad said, his voice cracking. You should have told us what you were planning. I tried to tell you 3 months ago, I said, my frustration finally breaking through. You told me I didn't understand business. That was different. How? I asked. How was it different? How many times have you told me my degree was impractical? How many times have you called my job cute? How many dinners have you told me to leave the business to the adults? I looked at them directly. I didn't want it to be like this. I wanted to help. But you couldn't see me as anything other than your daughter who doesn't understand the real world. You are 28 years old, Dad said weakly. I am 28 years old with $620 million under management, I replied. I am the 28-year-old who saw the SpaceX opportunity you missed. I am the 28-year-old who just saved 240 jobs. At what point do I stop being too young and start being someone you listen to? No one had an answer. I think we should vote, Thomas said. I raised my hand. Thomas raised his. Marcus raised his. 6 out of 11 board members voted yes. My parents and 2 of their old friends voted no. The motion carries, Thomas announced. The restructuring is approved. The restructuring is approved, Thomas announced. Dad stood up abruptly, his chair sliding back with a harsh screech. We will challenge this. We will find a lawyer who can prove that Emma manipulated the situation, used insider information. Every trade was logged and disclosed, Richard, Marcus interrupted quietly. I've reviewed every transaction myself. They are all clean. You can hire every lawyer in New York. It won't change the math. Mom was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, hurt, anger, and something else. Fear? There is one more item on the agenda, Thomas said, looking at his notes. Emma has requested to address the full company staff tomorrow at 10 o'clock. She wants to explain the restructuring and answer questions regarding job security. Absolutely not, Dad snapped. Those are our employees. They are the company's employees, I corrected him gently, and they deserve to hear what is happening from someone who can actually answer their questions about the future. They are terrified, Dad. They know layoffs are coming if we don't act. This is wrong, Mom said quietly. She stood up, gathering her purse with trembling hands. What you have done here today, Emma. It's not just about business. You have destroyed your family over money and control. I have saved your company, I replied, meeting her gaze. Whether you can see that right now or not. My parents left without another word. They didn't look back. The other board members filed out slowly. Some stopped to shake my hand or murmur, "Congratulations," while others, the ones loyal to my parents, avoided eye contact entirely. Finally, it was just Thomas, Marcus, and me in the silent boardroom. Well, Marcus exhaled, loosening his tie. That was the most dramatic board meeting I've attended in 35 years of corporate finance. It had to be done, Thomas said, rubbing his temples. Richard and Patricia would have driven this company into the ground rather than admit they needed help. Will they recover from this? Marcus asked. As people, I mean, not as executives. I thought about that question. I don't know. Maybe eventually. Or maybe they will never forgive me for proving them wrong. For what it's worth, Thomas said, placing a hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing. Not the easy thing, but the right thing. I closed my laptop, gathering my materials. I should prepare for tomorrow's meeting. The employees are going to have a lot of hard questions. Emma, Marcus said as I reached the door. That SpaceX contract, is it really solid? I smiled slightly. Verbal commitment from their VP of supply chain. Contract language is being finalized by their legal team now. We should have signatures within 3 weeks. Marcus let out a low whistle. If you pull that off, this company doesn't just survive, it thrives. You will have transformed us from a failing manufacturer into a key supplier for the biggest space company in the world. That's the plan, I said. My parents taught me to think big. They just didn't expect me to think bigger than they did. I left the building as the sun was setting over the parking lot. My phone buzzed with messages. My team at Quantum Capital wanted updates. Catherine Walsh wanted to discuss transition planning. My lawyer wanted to confirm the filing status. But there was nothing from my parents. No angry texts, no guilt-tripping voicemails. Just silence. I sat in my car for a long moment, staring at the Chin Technologies building. 25 years of my parents' work. 25 years of innovation, struggle, success, and ultimately, a failure to adapt. And now it was mine to fix. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Thomas. Employee meeting confirmed. Conference room B, about 200 people. Be ready, I typed back. I'm ready. And I was. I had spent 14 months preparing for this moment. I knew the company better than my parents did now. I knew every production line, every efficiency ratio, every cost center. What I wasn't prepared for was the hollow feeling in my chest. I thought about the way my father's voice had cracked when he asked why I hadn't come to them. But I had tried. 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago. Every attempt had been met with dismissal, with condescension, with the same tired refrain. You don't understand business. Well, now they knew I understood business. The question was whether they would ever understand why I had to do it this way. I started my car and drove away from Chin Technologies. Tomorrow, I would stand in front of 200 scared employees. I would introduce their new CEO. I would announce the SpaceX contract that would save their livelihoods. And somewhere in the back of the room, my parents would be watching. They would watch their daughter, the one who worked a little job, the one who needed to let the adults handle things, save everything they had built. Whether they would thank me or hate me for it remained to be seen. But the company would survive, the jobs would be saved. And for now, that had to be enough. If you think Emma made the right move to save the company despite her parents' ego, smash that like button. And here is a tough question for you. Is it better to let a family business fail to keep the peace, or take control to save the employees' jobs? Let me know your honest thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of boss moves and justice.